Hi, my name is Jesse Garcia, and currently I am a junior here at California State University, Chico. I created this video for my honors general education thesis, and the main point is to look at what coaching philosophy is, as well as how it develops and differs between sports. Before I could make a video on coaching philosophy, I needed to understand more about what it is, so I decided to go and talk with the sports psychology professor here at CSU Chico.
A definition of coaching philosophy?
Yes.
And just off the cuff, I would say that how a coach interacts with his or her players and how they, prepare those young people for going up against opponents, which is everything from physical as well as building like mental strength and the ability to withstand, pressures and stresses. So just an overview, I think coaches all have maybe different avenues of doing that. I think depends on the level that you're playing. So if you're coaching children, elementary school, junior high, can start to change in high school, but especially if they're just learning the sport, the definition of success is going to be not did you win, but what skill are you working on? How are you progressing? And then also look at how it's developing that child's, personality and behavior. Then once you get more serious, which usually toward the end of junior high, moving into high school, people become more aware of the desire to win, beat the other opponent. Then the idea of success is like, how many matches did you win? But it also, of course, includes how much are you improving on your skills. I think the sport does affect the coaching philosophy. Obviously, some sports are very physical, like there's a lot of physical contact, as in football, wrestling, basketball. So some coaches are responsible for helping their players deal with aggression and with following the rules and how to hold back or not certainly not intentionally hurt someone. While other sports, you hardly ever come into contact with someone. Like if you're a cross-country runner, you might accidentally collide with another runner, but it's not intentional. And so, I think the sport is very dependent on, how the coach issues instruction and how they deal with it psychologically, for sure.
Now, having learned a bit more about what coaching philosophy is and why it's so important, I chose to go out and interview coaches of varying different sports to find out for myself how their coaching philosophies formed over time. The coaches interviewed were John Pascal, the head coach of UC San Diego men's soccer team, Brad Rao, cross-country and long-distance track coach for American Canyon High School, Ruben Volta, the head volleyball coach at Sacramento State University, and Gregory Clint, the men's head basketball coach here at California State University, Chico. How a coach starts out is important to how they develop their coaching philosophy to begin with, and so I asked them how they began coaching and why they still continue to coach.
I got into coaching. I obviously love basketball. I played basketball. I wanted to continue a career in sports. One of the things that I love to do is lead. I love the relationships that I get to build with guys that I coach with and the guys that I coach. So coaching, was a good avenue for me to be able to stay in sports, to be able to stay competitive. Basketball was obviously the area that I knew best, so I knew I wanted to coach from the time I was probably in high school. I always thought I wanted to be a high school coach, and then I got to Chico State and played basketball at Chico State, and it was at that time when I decided I wanted to get into college coaching, and I had an opportunity after I graduated here to stay and go to graduate school and become an assistant coach. And then my career took me to a couple different schools before I got the head coaching job here.
I grew up, my dad was always my coach. And so, being in the home, you're around that coaching, that you're used to that lifestyle. Both my parents had taught, so I naturally became a teacher. My dad was always in coaching. He was always involved in sports. And so, it's kind of he taught me a lot. And so I learned from a young age about, how coaching works and, that there's a lot more to it than what you see during practice as an athlete. So he's the one that got me interested.
I grew up around my uncle who was a high school football coach, an athletic director. And as a kid, I used to go to their camp. I think that had some influence in it because initially I thought I would just become a teacher and teach physical education. Back then, I think they call it kinesiology now. And then through playing volleyball, I just got into. We had some parents of some high school kids approached myself and one of my teammates and asked if we wanted to coach a club team, and that's what really got me into first starting to coach volleyball. Was right towards the end of me finishing playing in college. So, and then once I started doing that, I fell in love with it. So.
Why did I first begin coaching? Great question. Passion of the game. Love playing soccer. You know, I started kind of coaching various soccer camps when I was in high school for, you know, little kids, and I enjoyed that. And you know, obviously I was a competitive player all through high school and college, and in college kind of continued to do some soccer camps and some coaching in the summers, and always knew I wanted to coach.
Why do you still coach?
For me, so I'm a teacher as well on the site, and really coaching is where you build all the relationships with students, because in your, you know, hour-long classes, it's not really enough time to really get to know, you know, students, so you can get to know a lot more people and help change them, mold them over time. You can see them improve, especially that's why I like track cross country is because it's black and white, right? You can see I used to be running this, now I'm running this, right? So you can actually see, whereas in football, it's a little harder to tell how much better is the athlete getting because it's not black and white like that, like it is with, you know, running with track. Oh, this was your 1,600 meter time at the beginning of the season. This is where it's at now. So that's how much you improved.
Okay.
So you can actually see the growth of all the athletes.
For one, every year is different, so it's not always the same challenges, I think. But I think I like the challenge of it. Division I volleyball is competitive. It's challenging to get a group to compete at the highest level that you think that they can achieve and to win. And I think winning is what drives us. So I guess it's the competitive nature of it that keeps me in it.
Well, I love, like I said, it's the relationships for me. I love the relationships that I get to build with the guys that I get to work with. The unique advantage I have as a college coach is I get to recruit these guys, so I get to hand select who I get to work with every day and every year. You look around our office and you see all these pictures on the wall. These are all guys that have played and graduated here in my 11 years here, and I have a relationship with all of them. But that's the biggest thing for me. It's just the relationship that you get to build with these guys and help them develop, not only as basketball players, but as people. And you know, we obviously want to win games, and that's a lot of fun, but really the gratifying part for me is just the day-to-day working with individuals and making them better and hoping they tap their potential.
I think the things you really like about playing that you don't necessarily even realize when you're playing is just the camaraderie within the team and the relationships that you are forming. And when I started coaching, you know, at UPenn, I quickly realized that coaching gave you the opportunity to do that. A little bit different than a player, obviously, but in some ways much more impactful. And I enjoyed it. I felt like I was kind of good at it. You know, I felt like a natural. It felt natural to me to start coaching, and but it was mostly about the relationships.
How would you, as a coach, define success?
I think that could be defined a lot of different ways. At the end of my career, I will define whether I've had success or not when I look back and I see how successful the student athletes that played for me, how they've been successful in their lives. What kind of family men are they? What kind of positivity do they bring to the workforce? Can they get a job and hold down a job? Can they be successful in their careers? Are they driven? Are they good role models in their community? I think at the end of the day, that's really what it's about.
So for me as a coach, success is basically we do the beginning of the season, all of their times, right? They're running. Their times have all improved. throughout the season. And you have also kept them interested and want to, continue to train. So I wouldn't deem it a success if I took a minute off your mile time, but now you absolutely hate track and don't want to do it ever again, right? That wouldn't be a success for me. So time-wise, yes, I did my job, I helped you improve, but it should also be fun and you should want to do it more. I don't want to lose athletes or, push them too hard to where this is no fun, we're just.
I think for me, success is having our players both individually and collectively reach their goals. There's growth that takes place in reaching for lofty goals, and I guess it's my job as a coach to create an environment that fosters that growth. And I think if my players are growing as players and people, then I've been successful. And if they're doing those things, most of the time, not all of the time, the team's probably winning. And it's as long as they're learning those lessons that come along with that, then I think I've done a good job. I think my job is to use the sport of soccer to teach the life lessons of hard work, teamwork, to these athletes, lessons that will go on to shape who they are once they get out of their sport.
Obviously, success comes on the scoreboard in terms of wins and losses, and obviously there's a good record of that by the end of every season. But there's so many different types of successes along the way, and do I feel like you get the most out of my players and the team every year from year to year? Do we have a successful season based on injuries? So I think that's sort of a difficult question to answer, other than at the end of the season, do I look back and think, like, were we successful in the wins and loss columns? And then, based on how the year went in terms of injuries and everything else, do I think we got better as a team, as a group, as a whole, and that sort of thing?
After learning more about their thoughts on growth, success, and why they coach, I decided to ask them the main question. What, if you had to put it into words, would be your coaching philosophy?
My philosophy is that we will work as hard as we possibly can, be as passionate as we possibly can, be as coachable as we possibly can, and be as unselfish as we possibly can. And if we can do all of those things and work towards a common goal, that's what my philosophy really is about. My philosophy is about building culture more than it is about what kind of offense we run, what kind of defense we run. The main reason, if I was going to tell you, well, why are we successful? We're successful because we have a great culture. And we do that by getting great people to buy into a vision. So it's hard to put into a few words, but it's really about, if I was to put it into a few words, it's about how we operate on a daily basis.
Team first, no doubt about it. Team comes first, and the team is bigger than yourself, and there's a lot of different roles and positions that go into making up a great team. But one thing is, you have to understand and learn those roles and execute the decisions and plays that come along with those roles. You also have to have 100% buy-in to what you're doing.
I just think of every year as sort of a puzzle piece, and I recruit the best athletes that I can for each position, and sometimes players are changing positions, and it's sort of, I'm going to recruit the best athletes that I can. If I recruit a player, I want them to be here for 4 years. I'm not the type of coach that's going to sort of throw players away if I feel like I've made possibly a mistake in terms of they're not progressing as much as I would like. I work with every player that comes in and make them the best player they can be by the time that they leave. I don't have a lot of players transfer through that process. I try and really pay attention to what their attitude is like, how hard they work, how hard they're self-motivated, are they going to be a good teammate, a good person, that kind of stuff. So I guess philosophically, I'm trying to recruit players that I think that are going to work hard on their own, are going to be good teammates, and people that are going to be fun to coach for a long period of time.
I think, as pretty much every coach, you want to be the best, put the best product out in whatever coach, whatever sport you're doing. So you want to be successful, and you want to find a way to have the students feel successful. Because success, what I've learned through coaching and teaching, is it's a huge motivating factor, being successful. So really, for me as a coach, you want to find a way to help motivate the athletes. And by doing that is showing them that they can be successful. So with me, as you witnessed out there with, Sebastian, he's getting down on himself, but it's like, you've PR'd every track meet, like you're getting better, so you need to see that. So they see the success and it motivates them to, push harder, to run more, to, practice harder.
After having listened to their philosophies, I decided to ask these coaches if they had advice for any of the aspiring coaches watching this video.
So my first question to you would be, what level do you want to coach at? Because high school is completely different from college, which is completely different from middle school. So before I came to American Canyon, I taught for 6 years at a middle school in Turlock, and our track team had over 100 kids on it, but middle school track is completely different than high school track, which is altogether different than college. So I know your focus is to be a coach, but at what level? Because if you're looking at college, it's probably a full-time job, depending on, maybe not if you're, a graduate assistant or a, lower level coach, but head coach or coordinators, or that's full-time jobs. Whereas high school, you can't live off of just being a coach. So my advice, if you want to look at high school or middle school, would be to get your teaching credential, as we talked about earlier, and then teach during the day a subject that you are interested in, that you like, or PE, which is also like similar to coaching through the day, and then you can coach after school.
Just don't be afraid to learn and to try things. One, you got to get coaching, find a team, and you can start young, and there's a lot of learning that takes place, but go observe and watch other coaches work, and just always be open to learning. I think sometimes as the coach, you're expected to have all the answers, right? And you don't, you don't. And as long as you're constantly learning and constantly like working on yourself, your teams and your players are going to be better for it.
Like one of the first things that always comes to mind is make sure you know what you're signing up for, because there's a lot that goes into coaching, and there's a lot of time involvement. It's not a traditional work schedule, so you're going to be coaching an awful lot on weekends, and so that's the first thing, is you're going to make a commitment to the sport and to your team, because you're going to want to be successful, which means you're going to be putting in different types of hours. You're not going to work a Monday through Friday type of job. I think that's the first thing, and then make sure they love it. Make sure that you really enjoy the coaching part of it and the sport.
I think that coaching is changing drastically right now, where 5 and 10 years ago, a lot of the coaching philosophy was negative coaching. Literally yelling and cursing at your players was acceptable, and pointing out what they were doing wrong was acceptable. And the terrain is really changing, just in psychology and in what people will find as acceptable behavior. So moving forward, I think people going into coaching now have the understanding that they have to be a lot more creative. If you have players that come late to practice, you can't just run them 10 extra miles to punish them. If you want them to change their behavior, you have to think ahead. You have to establish the expectations. Everybody has to know what they are. And you have to do things that are not going to punish physically and emotionally your players. Otherwise, you're going to chase them away.
I think that you need to try and be around really good coaches. If you want to coach basketball, for example, you need to go and be around people that are really, really good at it. I was fortunate to, when I played at Chico State and then coached at Chico State, to play for a guy named Puck Smith, who was a phenomenal coach. So I got to see how it was done at a really high level. My first job away from Chico State was at UC Davis for a guy named Bob Williams, who then went to UC Santa Barbara. So I coached for him as an assistant coach at Davis and UC Santa Barbara, and I learned so much about how to operate, how to how to build culture, how to hold guys accountable. I mean, I could go on and on and on about all the things that I learned working for him, but he was one of the best coaches that I've ever been around. A lot of what I do philosophically is what I learned from him. So my advice would be is to go around and learn and be coachable and try and get around really good coaches that do it at a really high level so that you can see how it's done. If you never put yourself in a position like that, then you're not going to know what to do, you know. So if you haven't played for somebody that's really, really good or worked for somebody that's really, really good, that would be my advice, is to go out and try and get as much experience as you can and learn and, you know, try to develop your own philosophy.
After reviewing everything I learned from all of these coaches and Professor Fairchild, it's pretty clear to see that their views on growth, their views on success, and their respective sports all played a major role in how they developed their coaching philosophies. These philosophies directly reflected their ideals, and through this, I was able to develop my own coaching philosophy. My coaching philosophy boils down to 3 main points: learning, communication, and will. I want to demonstrate to my athletes each of these 3 main points: a want to learn, to go into the classroom or onto the field and have a want to learn and get better; the ability to communicate. I want to be able to communicate with my athletes properly, as well as my fellow coaches, and I want to have my athletes be able to communicate with me and communicate with their fellow teammates just as well. The last point is will. And the reason I say will is because it's the will to go out and give your maximum effort each time you go to do something. And that will directly affects the first 2, learning and communication. If I can demonstrate these to my athletes and get them to follow suit, then I would deem myself a pretty successful coach. These ideals go for on and off the field, obviously, right now and later in life. And as I continue towards my goal of becoming a coach, this philosophy will likely change. But making this video has helped me come up with a philosophy of my own that I can use going forward. Hopefully, to the aspiring coach watching this, you've come up with ideas to create or improve your own coaching philosophy. Thank you for watching.